Episode 29, Operator Syndrome. We're taking viewer questions or listener questions or both. Steve, what do we got?
Yeah, well, we've got some really good questions for starters. A few admin notes. We're just thrilled that people are listening and actually generating questions. We're humbled but thankful. And so send us your questions if you have them, or topics you'd like us to talk on, or just really anything, feedback in general. What could we do better? What could we touch on that we haven't touched on? We're doing our best. We're kind of both humbled in the sense that we realize how faulty our memories are. Yeah, mine especially, because I'm an older generation than Patrick, and I go back and I just go, what? How did that go? Yeah, I can't remember. And it's things you thought you would never forget, but this is why it is helpful to write things down from time to time. I'm working on a project with a buddy of mine from Vietnam to try to get some stuff on tape, so we get it down. Anyway, so if you would like to comment or submit a question, our email is operator syndrome podcast, all one word, operator syndrome podcast at gmail.com. So fire away. And again, we love to hear from you. So today, in this podcast, we're going to take three questions that we received from a listener, and he's a faithful listener. His name is Bob, and he is a really critical thinker. He's not military, but that's interesting that our first set of questions are coming from non-military listeners, and it doesn't matter, military, non-military, whatever. We're open. So we're going to try to address these questions and play around with them a little bit in a serious fashion. So the first question is this, and I'll throw it to Patrick, and then maybe I'll have something to say. If your son or daughter wanted to be like dad and go into special ops, what would you say to him or her?
I'm gonna go first, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get my reaction. So if they wanted to go into special operations, I would, the honest answer is I wouldn't want. I've got a daughter. I I wouldn't want a child of mine. My initial reaction is I wouldn't want them to join the military at all, to be quite honest. Um, but I could understand it if they wanted to, and I wouldn't stop them from doing it,
Mhm.
right? Um, so first, I'd be like, are you sure it has to be the military? Is that
Right.
really what you want to do? Just because we know all the pain that comes from that, right? It's a tough lifestyle. We're obviously proud of our service,
Right.
but I'd always ask the question. People ask me sometimes. It always happens. Someone asks, "Hey, I'm thinking about joining up. Like, what do you think about that?" And I'll say, "Well, what is it you're hoping to get out of it,
Yeah.
really?" People talk about wanting to serve their country. I'm like, there are a lot of ways to serve your country that have nothing
Mhm.
to do with the military,
Right.
and things that aren't on the nose, right? Like being a cop, being a first responder. Those are obvious ways of serving your country, serving your community. But there are other ways too, right? It's just like being a good citizen. There are things you can do that could scratch that itch. If they decided that they wanted to join the military, I think that the next thing I would go into, again, I really drive down on goals. Like, what are you hoping
Right.
to accomplish?
Yeah.
One thing I always thought about when I was in is, when I was in, I ended up doing 5 rotations between Iraq and Afghanistan, um, you know, doing the Ranger thing, going to Ranger school, having those experiences. That's all fine and good. But there was a there was a radiologist tech based out of Camp Zama in Japan, who got paid the exact same thing as me, the same enlistment term as me, had the same GI Bill benefits as me when they got out. And in a lot of ways, I think like that person is infinitely smarter than I
Hmm.
am. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but would I go back and change what I did? No, not no, not a chance. I would never go back and be something different. Oh, ooh, I spoiled one, but there's more to say.
Mm.
There's more to say about that. So all that said, I'd really hone in on what it was they were hoping to get out of it, and if special operations aligned to what their goals were, uh,
Mhm.
at that point, I think that's something I could get behind if the intent matched what their goals were.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about you? What about you?
Yeah. I think that's right on. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. Um, I too have only one daughter, as Patrick does, and she's chosen a different path. So we never had to have this conversation. She just graduated from University of Kentucky with honors. Go girl.
There you
And
go.
she's going to serve her country by being an elementary teacher. What a great calling, public servant. So again, yeah, more than one way. We it is a pretty high level service to your country to choose to be a member of the military and to sign your life away or potentially and say I'm ready to go in harm's way. But yeah, it there are other ways to serve. So that's a good starter. I too would try to talk. I would not talk them out of anything, but I would try to do the same thing. I would say, and I had actually taken a few notes on this. I would try to steer them into, is there any other path that might be fulfilling other than the military? Part of that is a little bit selfish. You could get killed. Yeah, that's the bottom line. And I mean, that sounds kind of funny. Well, of course you could. But I mean, well, what are we talking about here? It's my child. I don't want him to die. I don't
Right.
even have to worry about it. Now they could die doing anything, but you got to admit, if you're going into a combat unit and get into a warfare situation, I think you're going to be going above the statistical, probability of getting shot or killed or hurt. So there's that. And but again, I jotted down the same thing. If in fact my child was insistent and said, I think this is the only thing that's going to make me happy, then I would get behind him 100%. I would be 100%. The worst thing you're going to do is try to get at odds with your child. You're a parent. Your job's to support them. Once they get to a certain age and they can start making their own decisions. I thought about too, it's good to know your children, to study them, to know their psyche. People are different. If I saw a child that I had always had a real sensitive side and a real empathetic side, maybe an artistic side, and these are generalities, but whatever the case may be, if I had, I think our emotions are really telling us smart things at times. Sometimes we're well, let's suppress our emotions and just go all brain. And I don't think that's always the case. I think a lot of times our emotions are telling us stuff that's really important, and we need to listen to it. So, in a mother's role, how important is a mother's advice for a child? I mean, I think generally speaking, a good mother probably knows their children on some level better than the father as far as nuances in at times. It's not a carte blanche, but it's just what does the mother have to say, and what does she think about this child's suitability for a lifestyle? It's going to be harsh. It's going to, let's face it, it's prickly. It's it's not for the light of heart. So I think another angle that made me think of all of this was, know our children. I mean, one size doesn't fits all. There's some kids that I could almost go, boy, the military would be perfect for you, because whether it's spec ops or combat or not, there's a structure and there's a rigidity and there's a coming of age that a lot of young men who don't have any focus can really benefit from. And especially guys that are kind of bouncing around, kind of getting in brushes with the law, maybe, and need some, maybe they haven't had good discipline or a father who really kept them in check, so that the military can provide something that would really help them. So it's just such a hard question on one level. Um, you know, just an anecdote to stick in here. There was a, it was kind of controversial, maybe kind of is an understatement, but there was a SEAL by the name of Chris Beck, and um, she is transgender, and she wrote a book. I forget the title, but I read it. I couldn't put it down. It was really fascinating because I'm like, whoa, that's not usual. That's not normal. I mean, as far as the general SEALs go, I mean, that's pretty uncommon. And the story was really kind of crushing because and she's a trans woman now, as she's fully transitioned, had operations and hormone and everything, as far as I can tell. And was actually at Dev Group as an operator. It was a multiple rotations to Iraq and I think Afghanistan. Hard fighter, and raised in Texas with a brother who was like a red-blooded, hunting, football playing, red-blooded male. And Kristen says, that's her name now, that she always tried to suppress the fact that she wanted to dress up in her sister's clothes, and they had this something, and she just didn't identify with her biological sex. So she tried to suppress it by, well, I got to be male. I got to be 100%, in all identity levels. So I'll just do the toughest thing you can. I'll join the Navy SEALs and be the tough, hard charger. That led to the point of a divorce and a multiple suicide attempts, not directly, but wanting to go in the fiercest fighting to be killed so that her family would have benefits, right? Because there's a whole sticky legal side of that. That's probably somebody that should not maybe have pursued. And I'm not taking anything away from heroism or valor, but just to get to that point where they were so frustrated they wanted to die. Maybe there would have been a better outlet than that. So it's just so hard to pigeonhole people and just say, this is for you, this is not for you. But all that to come full back circle to say, I would hope, I would ask my child the same thing. What's the outcome? And this is maybe my last comment on this first question. I get guys all the time through friends of friends or family members and their friends who know a Navy SEAL, me. And so their son or whatever wants to be a SEAL. What can they email you? Can they call you? And I've done this. Oh, probably you have too, Patrick. Just lots of times. Like absolutely, I'll be happy to talk or answer emails or whatever. And the questions are always they always seem kind of, and I was the same way. So I'm not. They're kind of starry-eyed. I want to be a SEAL. So I always go to what Patrick's point was, which is, what are you really looking to accomplish? What are your objectives? Like, what do you want to have? What do you see yourself being satisfied doing every day on a daily basis for years? If it's just walking around with bling on your uniform and getting creds for being, a badass, that's not good enough. Because, and this is the thing I tell guys that are seriously thinking about going into SEALs, you better be ready to work and work hard every day. I mean, pain and suffering and sweat and blood and tears and humping and swimming. There's it's cool to see the movies and see some cool takedown of Osama bin Laden's compound that takes about 30 minutes. I've talking to some Dev Group operators. That was an easy one. That was one of the more easy ones. The helicopter bit the dust, but they all got out. Everybody was okay. They didn't take any rounds. It was pretty chop. It was not that hard. Well, it's potentially it could have been disastrous, but that's the situation with any op if you know special ops. So anyhow, my question is, are you ready to just train your butt off and maybe never fire a bullet in combat, but you're going to spend your whole career, if you choose to make it a career, working your butt every day hard. And then they kind of go, huh. I was like, well, you better think about that, because the glory is about 5% and the hard work is about 95% of the thing. So I don't know. Those would be some of my thoughts.
There's also a lot of also a lot of talking. I'm gonna do this. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
do that. I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna be that. And especially with the people I encounter, and you said it right. I was the same way. When I was about to join, I consumed as many things Ranger related as I could, um, trying to figure out what was this thing I was about to get into. And you see that now. Um, but what I don't know that I quite see it is the that last step where you just do it. Okay, quit talking about it. Quit,
Mhm.
you can ask all the questions you won't want. It won't make it easier. Um, at a certain point, you just got to do it.
Mhm.
And there's it's not, I'm not saying it's a generational thing. That's not what I'm trying to get at all. Because if I were to look at myself at the same spot, could what I was experiencing, could that have been interpreted similarly? And maybe could have, but I was pretty dead set on doing it and charging forward. I didn't ask. I sort of signed up first and then was getting as much intel as I could about what it was I was stepping into. And that's in some ways that's dumb.
Yeah.
In some ways that's dumb, but that also saved me because I knew there was a difficult journey ahead, but I didn't psych myself out overthinking it and over analyzing
Right.
and being overwhelmed by data points that have nothing to do with you, and you don't know how you're going to do until you do it.
That's
So
right.
going back to a child, would you encourage it? I wouldn't encourage it. I'd probably try to steer them away. But if they went to do it, I would try to make sure it was aligned with their goals. And then at a certain point, I would try if they were going to do it, I'd want to support them, like you said. And then to make them successful, I'd sort of feed them the right sort of um, try to get them in the right mindset, which is, like you said, get ready to work. Don't worry about all the things you're going to have to do. Don't worry about how much it'll hurt. Focus on the next step, and then you'll get there. Because how proud would you be if your child ended up a SEAL or a Ranger or a Green Beret or a Raider or whatever? Of course, you'd be proud of them.
Yeah.
So, and you would want for them to, I think any parent would love to see their child set a goal, a hard goal, tackle it, persevere, overcome adversity in the process, and get the thing that they were shooting for, whatever that is. So yeah, if your child chose special operations, then and you got them to that point, why not?
Right.
What else? What's the next question?
Yeah. The next question is, if you and there's a couple of ways I could interpret this. I'm going to give you my interpretation, and if you have another one, Patrick, or if you may have another one out there as a listener, maybe that would be a clarifying thing you could send into us. Let us know, because yeah, I can't read between the lines 100%. So it says, if you met a raw recruit, so I'm taking that as somebody who is off to boot camp or already at boot camp, who told you he had met some pretty messed up former special ops guys. And there I'm assuming, okay, that's given, but maybe he had options, or she had options to go spec ops versus maybe going a different direction in the military. And he or she wanted your no shit advice. What would it be? So maybe I'll take that one first. And I'll read it one more time quickly. If you met a raw recruit who told you that he or she had met some pretty messed up former spec ops guys or gals, and he or she wanted your no shit advice, what would it be? All right. So assuming I'm getting this right. If they were in the military and they're saying, yeah, I've seen this as a problem. Now that gets into what, if I know what they're talking about here, messed up, that's an interpretive thing right there. If we're talking about operator syndrome, we're talking about suicidal ideation, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, hearing loss. Just there's a whole bundle of these things that go together. High cortisol levels, low testosterone levels. I mean, you get into the work that Dr. Frey did in operator syndrome, the journal article, you see a tangled web of really messed up issues, and just dysfunction on a lot of levels. And guys who I personally know some of these guys who have been to NICO, which is a clinic at Walter Reed. It's the premier PTSD TBI clinic. NICO is the National Intrepid Center, something, I don't know what O stands for anyway. And yeah, and I also saw some of this when I was serving as a chaplain and doing counseling at Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Dev Group. I hope, it's so hard. Hypotheticals are always hard. And history is always more easy to look back on than it is to try to look forward to. Like, we're out of Afghanistan. We're pretty much out of Iraq. Those things have passed. We've turned a page. And in my opinion, I think it's a good turning of a page. Collateral stuff notwithstanding, we're out. We're moving in a new direction. I hope we can heal. I hope we can, should we have to fight, I hope they're smart, quote unquote, smart engagements. I hope they're, clearly defined, all this, that we don't get bogged down for 20 more years in a place. I mean, it's the longest war in US history. It's pretty crazy. So to tell somebody who's a recruit asking this question, if I go in this direction, could I be messed up? You're darn right. It's very possible you could be. Will you? I don't know. I wasn't. Not on that level. I think I might have had a mild TBI with breaching and some boat issues, but nothing like some of my brothers have had recently, not even in the same hemisphere. And they're really, really messed up. And some of them are no longer with us. I did a funeral as a chaplain in Florida at Pensacola naval base of a guy who committed suicide, SEAL, committed suicide because he just didn't want to go on because of all this baggage. So I guess I would say you better be darn sure, you're ready to sacrifice, just like you want to, if you're willing to sacrifice your life for your country, you kind of almost need to be ready to sacrifice your health overall, mentally, emotionally, physically, to go that route, because that's exactly where you might end up. You might not. I didn't. I had some of my worst trauma as a chaplain, counseling families in mass casualty crisis. Now that wasn't physical, but it was definitely psychological and emotional. So that's a tangled question. And I would just say you better count the cost. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. I don't have any desire to tell anybody what to do. I have a hard time figuring out what to do for my own self. So, but just be fair warning. It could lead you down a dark path. I don't know, Patrick.
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's like you said, it's broad in how we could interpret it. If you're a fresh recruit, you're not really, or if you've just graduated, if you've just entered the military, you likely haven't met
Right.
on active duty that many special operators. I wouldn't think, unless you're already in some training pipeline or some contract that gets you exposure to those folks. And any folks you would get exposure to, I would think would have some semblance of, decorum, professional decorum. I wouldn't think that you'd see them that messed up.
Yeah.
So my initial thought was, okay, so these are people that you interacted with before you joined the military.
Right.
So, the first question I would ask is, are they really special operators? That's the
Right.
first one. first, like you said, there are folks who are messed up who have paid a heavy price for their service, and we need to make sure we get them the help they need. But but you know, we had the whole episode on stolen valor. It's amazing how many
Yeah.
SEALs and Rangers are out there compared to the actual the manning, the strength of those units. It doesn't seem to match. You know,
Yeah.
you run into way more than is actually on paper can be produced. And I've said it a million times. We were always under strength
Hmm.
over the time that I was in. So how could it be that there are all these Rangers out there?
Right.
It's interesting. And,
Yeah.
we talked about, mental illness tying to stolen valor. And so the first thing I'd ask is, are you 100% sure that you're talking to someone who's legitimate and someone that's just not ill in general? And that's a huge problem. I think we all know that there are a lot of folks who need help out there for those type of things. Um, so that'd be the first one, is to check, to double check what you're referencing against, because that's important, because that, if you're talking to someone who hasn't actually been in special operations, well, your frame of reference is skewed now. You're talking to someone who just tells war stories,
Yeah.
and they're not representative of the community that you may be interested in going in. So that's what I would say. If they are, in fact, if they were serving, or they are serving and they're messed up, I'd say a lot of folks are messed up, especially over the last 20 plus years of war. There are folks in conventional units that have had a rough time.
Yeah.
There are conventional units that saw plenty of combat
Sure.
to rival or exceed what any special
Yeah.
operations unit saw over that war, over those wars. So,
Yeah.
I'd say one good thing, if the context is you're brand new to the military and you're interested in pursuing that path, but you're worried that you're going to come out messed up, like, one thing I would say is the difference between when the war began and when it ended, in terms of what how we looked at those type of issues, how we treated those type of issues. I think one thing we can say, it's not great, it's not perfect, but it definitely got better.
Hmm.
So it stands to reason that, you know, as someone just beginning their career, you should benefit from all the work that was done over those 20 plus years to get you in a better shape. And you know, that's what we're always trying to do, is to leave the next generation in a better spot.
For
And
sure.
so hopefully you'd be the beneficiary of that. The type of risks, the type of things that we were doing, you wouldn't need to do, or there
Hmm.
would be mitigations in place to prevent you from getting unnecessary TBIs
Right.
and blast injuries and all that type of stuff. And, Steve, your point that, I mean, name the active war zone where we're seeing a lot of intense combat like we were over the last 20 years. Not for right now, as of when we're recording this, there isn't.
Yeah.
So, but if there is something that pops off, special operations would be the ones to be there first and to experience that. So,
Yeah.
but like you said, and what we said before, that's the risk. You're doing this job not because you want to run for office someday, not because you want to pad your resume, not because you want access to the network, which is a
Right.
very real thing, and we've all met people where that was their motivation. It often doesn't work out for them. But if you want to do the job, that's part of the job, and it's a risk. But I think what you'll learn in special operations is that, um, we're always evaluating risk. We're always trying to mitigate the risk. That's all. That's really all we do. That's really
Yeah.
all we do. We take calculated risks.
Right.
It's not just rushing into things
Right.
without thinking. I would say that's a benefit. So just know that that's the lifestyle, and that we're working to folks are working to improve things, and that shouldn't deter you from moving forward, unless those are things that you're not interested in which case maybe there's another job better suited for you.
Yeah. Totally. Very, very good point. Um, I had just had a couple of thoughts too. It's funny because one of the reasons I wanted to be a SEAL is because exactly what Patrick was saying. We take We plan carefully. We don't go on just like big level planning. Okay, we can take 20% casualties and still take the speech. We're like, no, we don't want to lose a single guy. We we'll send a sniper in to take out a machine gun nest rather than charging it with a fire team. And that's not to take anything away from that. It was just like, I like a style that's a little more calculated, a little more surgical, a little more, so in some ways, I just thought of this as Patrick was talking about. I mean, some of the infantry, some of the regular infantry, some of the regular Marine infantry has seen some of the most fierce. I mean, Dakota Myers, Google that guy's Congressional Medal of Honor, a Marine from Kentucky, my home state. Holy schmoly, I doubt very many people at all saw that kind of ferocity that he had to endure, and was rightly cited for the nation's highest medal. Unbelievable hero, that guy. There's a documentary called Restrepo. It was, I think, produced by Sebastian Younger and a cameraman, and they went into the Korangal Valley in Afghanistan. It's an infantry company, raw infantry dudes, young guys, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and they were in some of the fiercest fighting in the entire campaign, and they are so jacked up. So some of the question is like, well, Spec Ops guys, some of those guys are messed up. Well, sure, and some aren't, but there's some guys in regular infantry that are more messed up than anybody in Spec Ops. So watch that documentary. It will blow your mind. Restrepo, Restrepo. It was battle as an Army battle company up on a ridge, taking fire almost daily. I mean, fierce fire, and they got in some. They lost a lot of guys. So, yeah, and the last, just to reinforce Patrick's point, the stolen valor thing. Yeah, definitely check your sources. When you're hearing this and that and the other, and I'm messed up and I did this and I did that. My experience is the guys I actually know who are hurting or were hurting or in the process of healing from a lot of serious stuff, who are special operators, would be the last person to tell about it. They don't want to talk about it very much. They might talk about it to a trusted friend, a brother, a psychiatrist, or a chaplain or something like that. But if they're talking a lot, then my radar go off. Depending on how well you know them. And I'm not saying there's not true stories out there that are being told, but yeah, fact check a little bit.
One note, as a resident Army guy, the Restrepo folks, they were from the 173rd Airborne Brigade. So those were paratroopers. I know.
Okay.
I know they would want that. I know
Okay.
They would want that clarified.
For sure. I'm glad. I would want that clarified.
You'd want that too. They're They weren't legs. They weren't dirty, nasty legs. What about what's the last question? What's that last one?
Last question. This is another one that's a good one. Patrick might have alluded to his answer. Knowing what you know now, if you could rewind the tape of your life, would you choose to do special ops over again?
I said, yeah. I said, yeah. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't change anything. Right time, right place, right unit. I got the experiences I was looking for. I'm proud to be a extremely small part of the Ranger legacy.
Yeah.
To have played my part, and when I see what they're doing nowadays, I'm proud of them. How they're carrying on, and yeah, no, of course I'd do it again.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, because I wouldn't want to I wouldn't take $10 million in exchange for the experiences I had as a SEAL, the connections I made, the friends, the lifelong friends I've had, the pride I've had in serving my country. You couldn't put a price tag on that, because to me, it's all precious. The ringing never stops in both of my ears. I don't enjoy that. But I got off relatively easy. I have all my limbs intact. Um, there's so many people had it so much worse. I mean, so for me, it's kind of an easy call. Yeah, I would do it again just because of the incredible experiences I had and the unbelievable deep reservoir of drive that I have because of, making it through a selection like that. Sure, Patrick probably feels the same. So yeah, and even the tough stuff as a chaplain, like I say, the toughest stuff I went through, which is so ironic, is now it's not just that I was a regular old chaplain. I was serving with SEALs, and I'm a former SEAL. So there was a real emotional connection with seeing people hurting that are my brothers. That, like Patrick can tell you, you see a Ranger brother hurting, it hurts on a different level than somebody you don't know in another unit. Not to take anything away from their suffering or their hurt at all, but it's personal. I'm sorry, it's personal. And so but even there, I wouldn't go back and change it. And the reason why is I still get notes and cards and comments of, man, you were there at the exact time we needed you there. And as much as it hurt, I mean, man, they were hurting worse than I was. So it's always a matter of, I always looked at services, you know suck it up and remember, you know you're there for a bigger cause, and it's not all about you. So as much as that does hurt, it has real consequences. It's no, I wouldn't go back and take it, uh, redo it if I
Hmm.
had to. But
Hmm.
be
Now,
my
now that said, as we're closing out here, I'm aware enough of, like I said, other opportunities that were out there. If I had had different goals for what I was looking to accomplish, um, I can identify where there are different tracks and where other folks might have done other things, and they could be just as satisfied with their time as with what we did, right? So whatever path you choose, own it. You are who you are because of it, and I think that's probably the healthiest way in general to go, because I know that if we open this up to viewer questions, some question is going to be, and I hear that too, is I regret not doing XYZ,
hmm
and that's tough. That's tough, right? So, um, so be
right.
proud of what you do, whatever path you choose, own it, and you'll be all right.
Yep, I, I agree. Tough call.
Tough call. Well, viewer or listener questions number one in the books. Um, we will, like I said, if you got, like we said, if you've got more, send them to us. Um, we'll do another one of these every once in a while. We'll do one of these, and we'll just keep it going from there. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.